Hello, welcome to this community newspaper Facebook watch party, Excellence in Education. I'm Marta Perez, and our mission is to expose and inspire excellence in education. And before I introduce my extremely important and interesting guest who has done so much for education, please note that here at Community Newspaper, we use every safety precaution possible. We wore masks before coming in, hand sanitizers, had our temperature checked, and this great plexiglass allows us to be able to interview our guests and see through it. Also, please follow us on Facebook and send us questions via our chat room. Now, to the best part of this party, allow me to introduce a luminary in the education of children, not only in Miami-Dade and in Florida, throughout the United States. David Lawrence's latest book is called A Dedicated Life, and it is a life filled with good deeds and achievements. Too many to enumerate here. He is a brilliant writer and a copious reader. While he was publisher of the Miami Herald, the paper won 5 Pulitzer Prizes. In 1999, he left the newspaper business to dedicate his life to children. And of course, being David, he excelled in that too. Countless achievements, too many to tell you about, but one of the most impressive is the creation of the Children's Trust of Miami-Dade, which is now part of the Florida Constitution. He is a tireless worker for good causes, a dreamer and a realist. Our man on the beat, David Lawrence.
Thank
Welcome.
you. It's great to be here.
Welcome, David. And I describe you as a dreamer and a realist. Do you agree with that?
I am as idealistic and optimistic as I was 60 years ago. That would make me 17 and now, or 18 rather, and now 78. And that's a bit naive sometimes, but you get more from people by expecting good things. And in your own world of education, I can remember some years ago, George W. Bush talked about the soft bigotry of low expectations about children. And if you have low expectations of children, they're going to perform in that way. But if you think folks can do it, they'll reach for that.
Yes, and speaking of that, how old do you feel?
How
Because,
old do I feel?
yes, sir, I know how old you just mentioned how old you are, but how old do you really feel?
Well, I don't know. I have already lived 12 years longer than my father lived. And I know a huge benefactor of my own work is a man named Jerry Catcher, and he is now 94 years old and in good shape. And I saw something about Ruth Greenfield, who's a pillar of the community. She's 96 now. Tina Hills, whose husband, Lee Hills, was the first head of the Knight Foundation. In fact, it suggested it to Jack and Jim Knight way back in 1950. She'll be 99 in the next week and a half. So there may still be hope for people who are 78 and beyond.
Well, I know that I feel like I'm 18 in my spirit, and not physically, but I think that there's a difference in how we feel and our chronological age. So that's why I was curious.
Now, I do have more doctors now than I ever dreamed that I would, and my wife does as well. But no, I feel good. I feel
I know.
blessed to be here and would like to be around a while because I think I know something about what is wisdom, and I'd like to help and share.
And it seems that
yeah.
you're as busy as ever.
I'm painfully so I am.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
I have found it difficult all my life to say no to anyone. So if you ask me to do something, I'll almost invariably say yes. Now, I don't want this as an open invitation for people
Yeah.
to ask me to do
That's
things.
what I was
but
going to say. Okay, write it down.
Okay.
You have the method of contacting him is being scrolled. It's the Children's Movement Florida.org right under here. And he
But
can't say
I don't
no.
mind if people call me. My cell number is 305-773-1122. I live in a world, I always have, where you want to reach me, I shouldn't make it difficult to be reached.
I think
Yeah.
that's a wonderful philosophy, and I hope I do the same. I give out my cell number, and hope it never is abused. And so far, I haven't. It
Yeah,
hasn't been
most
abused.
people don't.
Most
Yeah.
people don't. Anyway, I know that one of the your world has been a world of many words. And how did you fall in love with a written word? Did that come to you as
Well,
a child?
I have loved the written word all my life, and I'm one of 9 children, and I grew up with the presents for Christmas and Thanksgiving when we got presents, or Easter, or birthdays were always books. And I was the kind of child when I was 11 years old, I'm the second oldest of 9, we got the World Book Encyclopedia, 19 or 20 volumes, and I would sit and read the encyclopedia because it was fun to learn things. I wasn't looking up something specific, I was just reading the encyclopedia. And I still, to this day, read at least a book, and usually more than a book every week.
How many books have you written?
By what?
How many books have you written yourself?
Written? Oh, well, I've done chapters of books, and I had to wait till age 74 to actually start on my own book, and I had helped a man named Mike Fernandez, who's a wonderfully generous citizen, with his book, and I thought if I could help somebody else write a book, it was a memoir, maybe I could do my own, and the rest, as they say, was history.
Yes, sir. And it's a wonderful book with many great stories. You're a fabulous writer. How important are writing skills? Do you think this is a program about excellence and education, and you certainly personify excellence. How important is writing skills
Well,
for our students? Because I find that is something that is being lost.
well, I think you're right, and I worry about two things: reading and writing on one hand, and the loss of the understanding of history on the other hand. Both of which are important for people to have. You know, people say, "Well, this is you were in one life. You were in 35 years at 7 newspapers. Well, how does that relate to what you're doing?" Well, I've spent my whole life kind of as a storyteller. What's the story here? And so, and I don't like the word particularly, but I'm kind of a marketing and sales person. I'm trying to sell people on the concept. I need to be able to speak in some decent way, and I need to write it out in some decent way. And I don't need fancy words. I know a lot of words, but I don't need $25 words when a word worth a quarter
Will do.
would take care of the same mission. So the whole fundamental of keeping this republic is to keep people informed so they can make wise choices, make sure that they are listening and reading things that they might disagree with, but it's unhealthy for us to simply read and think about and watch things that agree with us only. We need to talk with and learn from a lot of different kinds of people.
Yes, sir. And it is of concern that there are so many ways of receiving information these days, and many of them are not necessarily true. So when I look at our students, I know that it becomes increasingly difficult for them and for their parents to make wise decisions. But again, back to.
But there's an extraordinarily important thing that I would want everyone watching this to see, and I only saw it in the last week. It's a Netflix show called The Social Dilemma.
The Social Dilemma.
And it is stunningly powerful. It's an hour and a half. There are huge pluses to the internet, to social media. There are also huge minuses to all of this. the newspaper business as we have known it, the daily newspaper business, has been shredded to some degree.
Yes, sir.
And people think if I read two things on my iPhone, boy, I sort of know what's going on. Well, I don't think you really know what's going on by reading two things on your iPhone. Um, I watched the show and then sent a note to all five of my children saying, please watch The Social Dilemma because the power of devices in your children's hands.
Mm-hmm.
There's some pluses to that, but there are also significant minuses to all of that.
It's funny because my brother-in-law sent me that same text he about the social dilemmas. As you must watch this, and I think he's telling me that because I'm on the school board, and he feels that that's important about knowing about student
Every
children.
parent ought
Yes.
to see it, and every grandparent ought to see it. You care deeply about your own children as you ought to care about other people's children, and there are real consequences for the overuse of social media.
Yes, sir. Yes, I think I haven't watched it, but I know that
I'm counting on you in the next week to watch it, Marty.
Well, before you used to ask Dave would ask anyone he saw, what are you reading these days? And so he continues to do that when he meets people. He asks them,
So what are you reading these days?
well, what I'm reading a lot of texts from teachers that are very concerned about the reopening of
You
schools.
had a relatively long meeting the other day.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
30 hours
I know that.
long. It was a long meeting, and the school district is struggling with the reopening, and we'll keep the public posted. It's
I'll give you one book recommendation.
okay. Thank you.
There's a book by Isabel Wilkerson. It's
Yes.
number 4 in this Sunday's New York Times
Okay.
list. It's called Caste, C-A-S-T-E.
Cast.
It's an extremely important book. It's a very different way to look at matters of racism and so forth in this country and elsewhere. I've been in 56 countries. I've never been in a country that didn't have racism.
Yes, sir.
It's a different kind of
Yes,
racism,
sir.
but it is everywhere.
Yes, sir.
So Caste is the book.
yes,
It's
sir.
really special.
Yes, sir. And going to back to our theme of education and excellence in education, you have done more for education than most people in the entire United States. And one of the things, when you decided to leave the writing world and to leave the newspaper world, which, by the way, Mr. Grant has said that they have an opening at community newspaper and they want to know when you're ready to start here at the community newspaper.
Well, I already told you that I say yes to too many people, so make sure they don't see me
Oh,
subsequently.
okay. Okay. Tell us about the children's movement, the Children's Trust, the Children's Coalition. People don't necessarily know what the differences are, but they do know that the word children and David Lawrence are almost
So in
connected.
1988, a woman named Janet Reno,
Oh, yes.
not unknown, was the state attorney of what was then called Dade County. And Florida has a law, which is a quite unique law, that says if a county decides that it wants to raise its property taxes by a half mil or a mil for early intervention, and it failed 2-1. I retired at the beginning of '99. I looked into this. I argued something quite different from Janet Reno, whom I admire. And I argued that it wasn't about children in one corner of the community. You cannot build a movement based on those children, whomever they. The same principles that raise our 5 children are the same principles that every child needs. The right blend of health and education and nurturing and love and so forth. And so I led a campaign in 2002, and I said, you try it for 5 years. If you don't like it, dump it. But it's about everyone's child. So we passed it 2-1. It had failed 2-1. We passed 2-1. It then comes up again, the Children's Trust, and it wasn't accidental. It was called the Children's Trust. This is about trust. Biggest issue in our community, trust. Biggest issue in America, trust.
Trust.
Biggest issue in the world,
Yes.
trust. So in 2008, it's up for affirmation or it's gone. And it's in the third trimester of 2008, and boy, this country seems to be going to hell in a handbasket. The Great Recession was on, uh, financial institutions were imploding, people's homes were underwater, foreclosures. We had a brutal presidential campaign between John McCain and Barack Obama. Uh, so it was a tough time to do anything involved a tax. This time it passed with 83.5% of 84.5% of the vote. And what it provides is an extra $155 million a year for early intervention and prevention. So I was the founding chair of all of this, and you can only serve 2 terms unless you're in a different category. And so I served 2 terms, and then decided to start the children's movement, which is all about how do you change the priorities of funding. How, for instance, do you make sure that there is adequate money for Florida's pre-kindergarten program? We have 175,000 4-year-olds in the state of Florida provided pre-K. We're only one of 4 states with it available for all 4-year-olds in the country, and we're not a famous education state, as you know.
Yes.
So how do you change the priorities so that every child has an opportunity for a high quality pre-K education, but all the basics for early childhood from 0 to 8. I have argued and feel strongly that if you want public education reform in the United States,
Yes,
I'm a full product of public education, including public university. If you want if you want this in a country where 90% of people go to public education, 85% in Miami-Dade, you need to make sure that every child has a high quality education. Every child ought to have a medical home and health insurance.
Yes.
How do you spend $2 trillion to bring democracy to Afghanistan, which we are not going to be stunningly successful at? And then we have in Florida alone 300,000 plus perfectly legal children who have no health insurance.
Yes, sir. Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And the one other statistic I frequently use is 3 out of 4 young people ages 17 to 24 cannot enter the American military. So this isn't like when I went to the ROTC at the University of Florida and had to take apart a M1 rifle and whatever, which I wasn't very good at, incidentally. This is a highly sophisticated military. You need smart people who can read and write and compute things, etc. 3 out of 4 can't enter the American military. Have an academic problem, a physical problem, a substance abuse problem, or a criminal justice problem. This is scary for the national security of a country we love.
It is scary because it seems the more we do, the more behind we get. And so much of it, I think, involves money, but so much of it also involves the social fiber in which that child is it was brought up. And I said you had so many accolades. And part of the reason I think that other people tried to pass something like the Children's Trust and were not able to, and yet you did in a very difficult year, is because of the respect that everyone in the entire community in Florida, in the United States, has for you.
I don't want you to get carried away with this.
I'm not carried away.
This may not be quite universal.
No way.
And I have been
universal.
semi-insecure all my life and always wondering what I haven't done, but I also am not saving my energy for the next world where I don't think I will need a bunch of energy. But I simply believe if 85% of brain growth occurs by the age of 3, we need to be thinking about this far more.
Yes, sir.
The best thing you could do is, if I were a principal of an elementary school, I'd be finding out what's the feeder pattern to my elementary school. how would I connect relationships with childcare and early
Mm-hmm.
learning? How would I connect professional development and curriculum? You know, I looked up some years ago. I went back to my yearbook from seventh grade. I bought it on eBay. And I looked at how many kids were in my seventh grade class. Well, there were 37.
Mm-hmm.
And but I do not recall that we had trouble learning. We
Mm-hmm.
were self-disciplined, self-regulated. The
Yes.
teacher was the boss,
Yes.
and we were there to learn. So the big challenge here is not class size. I'm not telling you that's
Oh no, I
unimportant.
I
I'm
know.
talking about what's the quality of the teacher?
Uh-huh.
Is the principal a real leader? And are the children there eager and ready to learn? And of course, there's a whole bunch of ways of learning, and you don't need to be a graduate of a university to be a good
Mm-hmm.
teacher in this sense. How do you go to Publix or Sedano's or whatever else with your child at age 2 in a shopping basket and let's get one, two, three, four of these? Here is a square.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a triangle. Oh,
Yes.
there's a bunny rabbit on this box, and so forth and so on.
So you have won so many. I mean, really, if anyone looks David Lawrence up online, you'll spend days reading all of the awards.
You know the nicest honor I've had?
Which one?
Well, there are two.
Let's see if that's the one I'm going to ask
Family
you
of the
about.
Year is
That's
one,
the one I was going
but
to
the
ask you
second one
about.
was having a public school named after you,
Oh,
which is a thrilling thing to me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But Family of the Year. How do you? That is extremely. That was extremely impressive to me. Not only because you have a wonderful wife and a wonderful family, and that that which is part of the equation, but how how do we create wonderful families for our children? Because I think that is missing, and that every day is being lost. The structure, the family. How do you?
Well, some of these are learned skills. I mean, you can learn what to do. If you don't know how to go into Publix or Sedano's or Winn-Dixie or whatever and use it as an early learning lesson, then you're missing something. Or, for instance, lots of parents are exhausted and they put the child in front of the television. Well, the problem with television is that it has no interactivity. People need to be talked with, sung with,
Yes.
and so forth and so on. And there is nothing more important in my own work than a caring, knowledgeable, nurturing, loving parent. And a child who grows up without love is in deep peril to himself or herself and other human beings. People need to be needed, wanted, loved, fulfilled, and nothing more important than that. So I think we need to spend far more attention not on taking over for parents, but helping parents to know what to do. And don't take it away from parents. They do care about their children, but they
Just
might not know what to do. We also live in a community with monumental wealth and really poor people who are
mhm.
leading pretty hard scrabbled lives, may have multiple jobs. There are a lot of challenges in this community, including cultural.
Very.
I don't think language is anywhere near as big a barrier as poverty and culture
Yes.
of people looking at the world in different
Different.
sorts of ways. How do you learn about other people and other people's cultures, and
Yes.
how do you respect other people and figure out what we got in common? Miami, now this isn't probably a popular thing to do, is still a pretty segregated community. I'm just
Very.
not talking about black and white.
Very.
Segregated in different ways. We talk about diversity and pluralism. One of the questions I frequently have for people: whom did you have in your home in the last 6 months?
I know.
And people tend to be most comfortable with people like themselves. So
Yes.
that's probably pretty natural.
Yes.
But we need to overcome that
Yes.
to do. Here we have this great big country of 330 million people. That a country, I won't be alive, but most people will be alive when this country what is called the minority will be the majority.
Uh-huh.
There are already more children of color born than non-children of
Yes.
color.
Yes.
Uh, let's get with the future
Well,
and make something good out of it.
and this is the first time I've heard you say, look at yourselves. Do you have people that don't look like you, or your ethnic or cultural group at home? And I thought, that's true. But I do. So I feel that it's such a wonderful thing, because it allows me to grow as a person, to see other people's perspectives as well, not just the perspectives of the group that I'm in, which I'm not exactly sure what group I'm in, because I feel very American, but I
But you're
don't.
in a lot of different groups, and I'm in a lot of different groups, and that is all healthy. And there ought to be one of the joys of life ought to be lifelong learning, and there are a
Exactly.
lot of ways to learn. Books is one way, talking with people in another, being in different neighborhoods is another
Yes.
way.
Yes.
That's the opportunity of this country.
Yes. Now I have another award that is very impressive too, and that is Father of the Year that you won. And I have a son who has three children, and I know just how challenging during this time. It's extremely challenging for families, and I know you have children, and you know that it's tough during this time of isolation to to deal with this. And somehow moms, it just seems a little easier, but for dads, it's a tough time. And tell us about what you think. How important is the role of fathers, and how in this day and age, how we can encourage our fathers?
Yeah, we have a long way to go on this subject.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I do see great examples. I can think of one of my own children who he and his wife are both partners in law firms, and they're doing very well, but they also have three children, two of whom are 3-year-old twins. Twins are is an extra burden, extra and loving burden in society, and they're great people. But I see how much time he spends, and what a true partnership they have. If I were completely honest, and I'm going to try to be, my wife Bobby, or Roberta, had a lot more to do with raising 5 children than I did, and she handled every nickel we ever had, because I never particularly cared about money. It just wasn't interesting to me, though the Herald was a big business in my time. Uh, so, uh, as you know, my wife has Alzheimer's now, and she's actually doing quite well, and I owe her everything. We've been married 57 years this December. I love her more than when we were married, but it's my turn to do a whole bunch more things. And actually, one of the pluses of the pandemic, and I don't think it's been an overall plus, believe me, is that I spend almost all the time at home, and I'm much more useful, and I'm doing things and making appointments and that she would have handled every bit of this before. So I'll give you one quick story. For instance, she was a saver. I move every piece of paper I move off my desk quickly. That's just who I am. And I may say, bring up on such and such date. Well, if you've been married 50 plus years, and if your wife is a saver, we save stacks and stacks and stacks of stuff. So when we had this new challenge, what happened is that I brought in an accountant, and every 2 weeks he would come in for 2 hours. We'd sit at the dining room table, which we don't use for dining except on almost no occasion,
Uh-huh.
and we would go through, and most pieces of paper you have you don't need. But which pieces of papers are those? And tax records and so forth. So I shredded. My favorite sport is shredding,
Oh.
and I have my own shredder,
Uh-huh.
and so I shredded thousands of pieces of paper, set up a filing system. I felt better about myself just for trying to. I'm trying to have fewer things.
Right.
in my house.
Yes, and you spoke, as you always speak so lovingly of Bobby, Roberta, your wife, and you've been married for 57 years, and that is quite an accomplishment. And tell us, what is the secret to a happy marriage?
Well, I think the most beautiful thing about a happy marriage is you go home to somebody you trust.
Mm-hmm.
To have somebody you trust totally. I was a paid skeptic for many years, but never a cynic, and there's a big difference.
What's the difference between a skeptic and a cynic?
I think in this republic, asking a lot of questions and not simply taking something for granted, I think that's an important thing to do. But I think a cynic essentially adopts the worst of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten to do lots more by expecting good things and then working hard to make them happen. So to be able to trust somebody totally. Remember, we have now known each other
Mm-hmm.
since we were freshmen at the University of
Wow.
Florida. So and that was 1960.
So was it love at first sight?
No, I dated some other people first.
Oh.
But as soon as we started dating at the college newspaper, I think it was love.
Have you heard if it was love at first sight for her?
She's never fully acknowledged that. Maybe she's intending to tell me this something soon. But the big joke we have in our family is that she was with me 50 plus years ago, and this person we knew quite well told both of us that I look like a Greek god.
Oh my goodness!
And
Oh my goodness!
that is neither of us has ever quite accepted that. No, she loves to read. We love to go to movies. We love to be with people.
When did you, in your male mind, think this is the woman that I want to spend the rest of my life with and have children with?
Oh, it very, 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 very quickly.
Very quickly.
I mean, once we started
what
dating,
was
there
it-
was
what-
never going to be
why?
anything.
Why? What was it? What was it about her versus other? You were
Well,
dating other girls.
I think she was,
Was
and,
it
and
the
is a
fact-
person of real intellectual depth and eager to learn and wanted to live a life that would be interesting. I mean, not many people get to have dinner with Queen Elizabeth, and so she had dinner. She was at another table at another time. We had dinner with Margaret
But
Thatcher.
had not done that before when you met her.
No, but both of us, we were beautifully naive, and we expected good things to happen. Neither of us came from any money. We had our first child 9.5 months after we were married, and my wife had in her second and third months of pregnancy between them a major league case of German measles.
Oh my goodness!
This
wow.
is very scary. People don't get it anymore, but it was very scary. And this child walked late, talked late, went to Easter Seal, and is now an appellate lawyer in New York.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I've always thought good things could happen, and I think she thinks good things could happen, and that was good for us.
Not to mention, she's beautiful and brilliant. So, unfortunately, our time is up. I have so many more questions, including asking you about your current dreams, but we have to close, and we want to thank the community newspaper for allowing us this great Facebook watch party, Excellence in Education. And I want to thank you for all you do, for all you continue to do, and how very wonderful you are in our community, David. It's a pleasure, an honor knowing
You're
you.
a very special person, so thank you, and do not ruin any chance I have at humility, please.
Oh,
Okay.
you have
Okay.
you have nothing to be
Okay.
humble about. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
please watch us again at this community newspaper's Facebook party, Excellence in Education. Thank you.